Equisetum telmateia, great horsetail.
We are here in Seattle, Washington in the greenbelt, and we're going to wander around to see if there's some cool plants that we can learn some cool stuff about. So we have, well, bigleaf maple is pretty neat. It's one of the most dominant species around here. It's actually experiencing a bunch of herbivory, which if we could find the culprit of the herbivory would be pretty interesting, but I'm not sure that we're going to do that today. Let's see what else we have. Himalayan blackberry, introduced species from possibly the Himalayas, but possibly not. Look what we got here. Well, I know this is horsetail. I don't really know much more about it than that, but I just as a kid knew that this was always called horsetail. So let's look into that. So we knew this was horsetail, and we looked into it a little bit, and we pretty quickly found that in the whole world there's only one genus of horsetails. And genus is just sort of a level of identification that's between species and family. So all that exists now is one family of horsetails, and within that there's one genus, which is Equisetum. And we looked up over a few resources like iNaturalist and the herbarium records here in Washington, and there's a handful of species here, but there are only two that really look like this. There was giant horsetail and there was field horsetail. And just by the fact that these ones are so tall, we know that this one is giant horsetail.
So how do horsetails grow and reproduce?
Horsetails can reproduce by multiple ways. So first is by producing spores. Horsetails are not seed plants like most plants you're used to. They produce spores like in the same way that mosses and ferns do. But they can also reproduce by their roots, or what's called their rhizomes. So they basically just send out roots and then another individual will pop up. And because of that, it explains why there's this big mass of them all in one place. And you see really dense packs of plants, that often is an indication that they're reproducing by their roots in some way. And you can actually tell by the way they look whether they're reproducing by spores or by their roots. So in this species, when they're reproducing asexually or just through the roots, they produce these big long leaves like this. But if they're reproducing by spores, they produce a single stalk that looks kind of like a sprig of asparagus that has a sporing body on the top.
Do you have any random history tidbits about these?
Horsetails actually played an interesting part in mathematics, where in the 1700s, John Napier was looking at horsetails, and he saw that the segments down low in the plant between each cluster of leaves were farther apart, and as they got towards the top of the plant, they got closer together, but not in a sort of consistent linear fashion. And his observation of that inspired him to invent the mathematics of logarithms.
Do they have any functional uses for humans?
Horsetails have high levels of silica, which is this sort of like sandy, glassy-like substance. And it's been used by Aboriginal peoples as an abrasive. And it's also used today by woodworkers. They'll grind it up, and it's can get wood smoother than any other sandpaper.
How about their evolutionary history?
Horsetails are what's often called a living fossil, which means they're distantly related from any plant that exists today. In fact, 100 million years ago, they were one of the most abundant types of plants on the planet, and there were huge ones, like 30 feet tall, that were just called trees. Now there's only smaller ones, and there were probably hundreds of species 100 million years ago, but now there's only 15.
We just barely scratched the surface with backyard discoveries. There's a ton more to learn out there. And if you are interested in horsetails, we encourage you to do independent research. There's a lot more to learn on that topic as well. We will be back in the future with more episodes, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.